Anyway, if you've got your Bible, open with me, please, to the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus in chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Okay? And that's where we're going to pick up tonight. We're still in the introduction to the commandments. Okay? And we've covered several things up to this point. We're going to cover several more things before we actually get into the commandments. Okay? And I think I got a little bit. Let's see what. Oh, that's the one. All right? It is important, the format or the form in which the commandments were written. Now, we say that several different religions, they number them different ways. The numbers are not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, what is important or what's truly important, is what they say, and that do not alter what they say. And the reason is because they are moral absolutes. You know, today everything's written. It doesn't matter what law it is, what insurance policy, what contract. It's written with an out clause in it. You know, so if you get to a point where you just don't want to do that anymore, you know, there's a way to get out of it. Okay? These, there is no out clause. What it says, it actually means. You know what I'm saying? And they are absolutely moral absolutes, which means that each and every one of us, it's written in the first person singular, which means it applies to each and every one of us individually. It applies to our families collectively, and it applies to our church and our nation and our societies as a whole. Okay? So it's written so that it affects each and every one of us. Okay? And so, you know, I'm kind of uncomfortable when they start changing the format. Now, I want to look at something that we started into, I think, week before last. Because last week we had the voices of Zambia. But what I want you to understand is this. 8 of the commandments are stated negatively. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? It says, thou shalt not. Is that not right? Okay. And then that means that the other 2 commandments are stated on the positive. Okay. Which means we're told what we should do. Now, this is important because here's the deal. When we are told immediately, thou shalt not, whatever, you fill in whatever commandment you come out, what immediately comes to our mind?
It means don't do it.
It means don't do it, but what is the flip side of that? What is the positive? Okay, if we're told what? You should not steal, what does that mean? Okay, we shouldn't steal anything, but what? The flip side of the positive of that would be what? To love your neighbor enough to what? To not steal from them. Now, I know y'all have watched down in the hurricane and how, you know, ugly it's gotten down there. People are stealing, you know what I'm saying, and looting and one thing and another. And the thing about it is this. It says that they shouldn't be doing that. But on the flip side, they should love their neighbors enough that guess what? They're in the same shape you're in. You know, you're stealing from people that can't help themselves. Have you ever thought about that for a minute? That's kind of about as low as it gets. Because they're just as bad off. For you to say, well, I'm hungry and he's got something, and I never understood that. I never understood why people say, well, I stole because I was hungry, but it took the 55-inch TV out. You know, last time I checked, you know, you can't boil that thing enough to eat it. But we were hungry. No, I don't think so. You know what I'm saying? Because most of the time, guess what? If you broke into their places and they've been without power, guess what? The food that they've got ain't no good either. So it didn't do you any good to break in. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is when he says, thou shalt not commit adultery, what does that mean? That means that we have enough respect for God and enough love for ourselves to do what? To not be involved in that. Is exactly right. And what I'm trying to get you to see is that there's a flip side to it. Just like when he says that we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, body, and soul. Alright? What does that mean? The flip side of that is what? That's a positive. Okay? But the flip side of that is what? That we shouldn't have no idols. That we shouldn't have anything that separates us from that love. Does that make any sense? Because that's really important for you to understand, because the form doesn't need to be changed. And unfortunately, when you get into some newer versions, there's that thou shalt not, it changes. And that's why people today have got it in their minds that it's the 10 suggestions and not the 10 commandments. Because when he says, look at verse 1 of chapter 20. What does it say? And who? And who? So where is this coming from? This is coming from the creator of the universe. Is that not right? Guess what? You know what? There's no negotiation. There's no, Lord, please, I need to do a little of this or have a little of this going on. There's no negotiation. It is absolute. Is that not right? So they are commandments and they're not suggestions. Okay? So, let's go press on real quick. I've got a lot of introduction. So, this next section in here is Jesus and the 10 Commandments. All right? So some people would say, well, if we're under grace, then what use do we have for the commandments? Okay? If we're under grace, what use do we have for the commandments? Anybody? It is a guideline. You have to stay under grace, right? Why the commandments?
Setting up rules for life.
Setting up for rules for life. Let's read, I'm sorry. Okay. What do you mean by that? He says, I came to fulfill the command. I didn't come to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. What do you mean by that? Everybody want to take a stab at it? It's not impossible to live by, but it is perfection that it requires, because the law is perfect. So if you can't live by it, what does it do for you?
It points out your sin.
It is the schoolmaster that says what? I have to have grace, because without grace I can't do this. Does that make any sense? That's why the law is good. People say, well, you're being legalistic. That's not what he's talking about. The law is good because the law is the schoolmaster that brings us to a point that says, I got to have grace because I can't do this. I'm not perfect. Okay? So it's important that you realize that Jesus taught the law. Now, let me ask you this. Why would that be important to his teachings? Why would it be important for Jesus to teach the law?
Because he's perfect.
Well, because he is perfect, absolutely. Okay? But why else? Sorry? He is a teacher. But why in his ministry, why is it so important that he teach what he's teaching about the law?
Not one another.
Why didn't he just say, hey, I just came to do away with the law?
Because it shows that he is God, he is perfect.
That's part of it. Yep. Anybody else?
Well, you need to know the difference between right and wrong, the difference between what is sin and what is not sin.
Okay. I'll take that too. What about this? Who's he talking to? He's talking to us, but who is he talking to at the time? He's talking to Jews. Is that not right? What would have happened if he had said, the law is just not any good anymore, we're not going to do that? I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. Go to a Muslim today and tell them that the Quran is just a fairy tale. And find it and look at the response you get. Okay? Why is that? Because they what? From little on have grown up with this teaching. Do you see what I'm saying? Now he's asking people to change the way they live and the way they think. Had he come in and attacked the law, right, what do you think his chances would have been to ever win any of those? Probably slim and none. Is that not right? Not to mention all the things that you've mentioned that shows us that we need grace and that he is perfect. All right? But this teaching is important to Jesus' teaching, and it is interwoven throughout the entire New Testament. Okay? So when somebody pops up and says, gee, by the way, we don't this and we don't that, and I'm thinking, man, that's all right. No. Most important 10 commandments, the most important moral, civil laws ever written. Just every civilization you know of has got some form of these. If they don't, it's just anarchy. Okay? All right, so it was important that he teach it. All right, listen to this. Most people would say, well, the basis for law is what? It would hope that you would say love. Most people would say, well, I have to obey it because if I don't, God's going to, send a lightning bolt to get me. Well, see, if that's the way you feel, and it is only fear out of which you serve or you obey, how long will you do it? Only as long as you are what? Afraid. The minute you're not afraid, what will happen? You'll do something different. So he said the motivation has to be love. Can't be anything else. Listen, this is Matthew 22, 35 through 40. It says, then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt what? Love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now, look back up to what he says. He says, how should we love God? All our heart, soul, and mind. What's missing? Because most of the time when we say it, what do we say? Heart, mind, body, soul. We add what? Why didn't he say the body? Because the flesh is desperately wicked above all things, who can know it. Also, what about on the flip side of this? Flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom of God. Right? What is the flesh going to do? It's going to sin. If it gets half a chance, it's going to sin. That's all there is to it. But all these other parts of the body that make us up, like God, he says what? We should absolutely love the Lord. How? In all those different ways. Is that not right? In other words, it should be an absolute love. There should not even be a question. Now the second one, this is interesting. Because some people would say, well, Jesus modified the commandments. Did he modify the commandment?
He expounded on it.
Okay.
He got more depth.
Okay, got more in depth. Anybody else? So now are there 11 commandments? They're not. There's still 10. What happened? Because the last part of this verse tells you right here. Look right here. And the second, thou shalt love thy neighbor. On these two commandments hang what? All the law and the prophets. Now, what do you think he meant by that? That's a good one.
Yeah.
Y'all are getting me that doggone. This hurricane's still going on in y'all's mind. Either that or y'all didn't eat dinner before y'all got here. One of the, I don't know what's going on. But really, I mean, what is he saying? Okay, if you don't have the first two, you don't have the others. Anybody else? Let me ask you this. If you love your neighbor like you love you, okay, are you going to steal from him? No. Are you going to kill him? No. See, all those things, guess what? If you can love God with all your heart, right? If you love God with all your heart, what are you not going to do? You're not going to have any idols. You're not going to have things that come between you and him, right? Okay? So then he says, guess what? If you love God like that, that's taken care of. Then the rest of the law is taken care of in what? If you can love your neighbor like you love yourself, guess what happens? Everything else takes care of. You don't have to have somebody tell you don't kill somebody. You don't have to tell somebody don't commit adultery. You don't have to tell somebody, hey, don't steal. You don't have to tell somebody don't lie. Why? Because if you love that person like you love yourself, are you going to do any of those things? You absolutely are not. And so what he's saying, and you need to get, he didn't modify the law, but look right here. He said, on these two commandments hang all of the, that's the 10 commandments. And not only the law, but what else? Everything that was contained in the Old Testament, as the prophet said do, guess what? If you love God with all your heart, and you love your neighbor just like you love yourself, it's taken care of. It's covered. Because that's the way you're going to treat them. That's the way, you know what I'm saying? When they need help, you're going to go and try and help them. If you love your neighbor like yourself, you're going to steal from them? I mean, you're going to go and loot? No, why? Because you love them. Would you want anybody to come loot from you? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, Jesus kind of enlarges this love your neighbor part here in John chapter 13 in verses 34 and 35. It says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. Now, that's what we told us before, right? Love one another. Love your neighbor like you love yourself, right? Now it expounds a little bit. It expands. Because now what's he saying? It's not enough to just love your neighbor like you love yourself, but what? Okay, now the qualifier is what? You got to love your neighbor just like he loves me. Now, how does that expand? What's the difference? Well, say that again, Mr. Austin. Was that you? Was it? Miss Barr? He said what now? Go ahead.
His love is unconditional.
Okay, I go with that. His love is unconditional. What about this? His love is sacrificial. It means that it will give of itself when it's not convenient, when it's... have y'all ever had anybody call you for help when it was convenient? I mean, were you just sitting around saying, well, I ain't doing nothing. I mean, I'm dry and warm and all that stuff. Yeah, I'll come out in the snow and help you do that. Anybody here? Right? It's always when you just got to shower. I got a call the other night, and Mary had actually made something in the house. I couldn't believe it was shocking. And it was pot roast. And then I sat down in the phone. And an hour later, I better put it back in the pressure cookers. An hour later, I got to eat. You know why that is? That's because when people are in need, if you love them, guess what? You'll put aside what you need. It's not like I couldn't miss a few meals, a few hundred meals. But still, my caterer's got it right. But still, you put all that stuff aside because guess what? You want to try and help if you can help. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes just talking to folks is enough to encourage them. But I want you to know something else about that verse. Not only does he say that we're supposed to love him like he loved us, but there's something else in the last part of the verse. Anybody catch it? I didn't read it. Can somebody read it out loud? Can you see it? Okay. Look right here. He says, by this all men know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. What does he say now? First, you got to love them like Jesus loves you. Okay? Now, what's it going to show? It's going to demonstrate what? To who? Everybody you come in contact with, what? The love of Jesus. Okay? Now, whether you realize this or not, and I know everybody likes good, hell, fire, stomping, preaching, and all that stuff. But when people get saved, let me tell you why they get saved. Because they begin to understand how much Jesus loves them. That's when you get saved. And he said, guess what? If you want to demonstrate my love, the love I have for you, to someone around you, you be the first one at the doorstep to say, here I am. Here's my rake. Here's whatever you need. You know, hey, your garbage can got knocked over. Hey, I'll pick it up for you. You be the first one there. Right? And people around you, in the neighborhood, in the block, the people you go to church with, the people you go to school with, the people you work with, before long, guess what will happen? That word will get out that there's something different about that guy down there. You know, he's the first one when somebody's got a water line busted. He's the first guy there. And the reason being is because what you're doing now is demonstrating Christ's love, which is to give of yourself. And sometimes, you know, that's all people want. People just want a little bit of your time. Now listen to this. This is in 1 John 3 and 16. It says, hereby perceive we the love of God, because he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for who? For the brethren. But whosoever hath this world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion for him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and truth. What's he saying? You have to demonstrate that love, all right? Because guess what he is saying? That there are people that will tell you that they love you. There are people who tell you that call me when you got a problem, and of course their cell phone is off. You know what I'm saying? There will be people who will say, hey, man, if you just get down and out, just call me. And when that happens, what do? Can't get in touch with them. Don't know where I'm at. Oh, man, I'm on my way to the ball game. Oh, I really, most of the time you just can't get in touch with them. That's the easiest way to avoid it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that caller ID is the best thing in the world. It's a different number. I don't know. But the idea is that guess what? We should be doing what? We should love one another to the point of being able to do what? What do you say? How do we perceive the love of God? First part of the verse. Because he laid down his life for us. And what did John say? We should be willing to do what? Lay down our lives for who? For the brethren. Now, brother, let me tell you something. When you start looking at your life and saying, hey, you know what? My people are at home in the dark and cold. But I'm coming to your house to make sure you got firewood so that you can build a fire so that your people can stay warm. Now you've done what? You've demonstrated God's love. Because what you said is, yes, my folks aren't. And I'm going to tell you something. We say, that ain't that big a deal. Dude, you can get some senior folks and get them cold enough, and you got problems. I mean, they don't recover, And so when somebody comes to you and says, I ain't got no firewood, guess what? You better pony up and load up some firewood and carry over there. That's what God tells us to do. Even if you got to sacrifice some of what you got to carry it over there. So the idea is that guess what? When you can tell somebody, hey, let me ask you a question. How many people would be members of this church in this community if they knew this body of believers was willing to lay their life down for them? How many members do you think we have? You couldn't build places fast enough for them to sit. If they knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we were willing to lay our lives down for them. If they saw that in this fellowship, people, they'd be beating the door down. They'd be down here when we weren't having church. But the thing about it is today, what do? Most of the time, how do we love folks? With our mouth. We tell them we love them. Oh, we hug them and all that stuff. But then when something like this hurricane comes along and people say, hey, man, I ain't got no power. Dude, if you got power, you better load your generator up and be hauling somewhere. If you can get over there and help them. Because that's the way we demonstrate God's love. And that's important because these commandments are the school teachers that will bring us to that point. Now listen to this. Our love is also demonstrated by obedience. This is in John chapter 14, verse 21. It says, he that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me, and he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him, and I will manifest myself to him. All right? So now what does he say? There's a qualifier here. It says, if you got the commandments, and what were the two greatest? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and what was the other one? Love your neighbor like yourself. Right? And he goes on to say, love the brethren how? Like you know what I'm saying? That you're willing to sacrifice for them, okay? Now what does he say? He says, if you, talking about you now, if you have my commandments, what should you be doing? Should be obedient to them. Is that not right? And if you're not obedient to them, are you in God's will? You absolutely are not. You absolutely are not. And today, people, and I guarantee that's about 90% of the reason people don't read their Bible. Because when they read their Bible, guess what they're going to find out? They're going to read those words, and now what happens? They're accountable, but whether you realize it or not, you're accountable for them anyway. Well, I don't read, and I can't read the Ten Commandments. Does anyone think of that and say, this applies to everybody except folks who can't read? Doesn't. Who's it apply to? Everybody. Listen to this. 1 John 5:3, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not what? What does he mean by that? They're not what? They're not heavy. They're not something that lays on you. You know, you have people all the time that will come to you, and they will ask you various things. And they will say, well, preacher, I've been trying to find my concordance, and I can't find the Marlboro Man in my concordance, so I guess it's all right if I smoke. Well, preacher, you know, I've been looking for them Clydesdales all in the Old Testament, and I can't find them. Is it all right if a person drinks? Now think about the question for just a minute. Because the question is not, should I do it? The question is what? Can I do it? You're asking for license. You're asking for permission, is what it boils down to. And you say, well, there ain't no commandment. I don't see nothing about Budweiser in there. And why can't a man have a drink? You know, Walter Bed will have some alcohol in the house and all that kind of stuff. Well, the thing about it is there a commandment that says, no, you shouldn't do that? Well, really there is, but still, in the sense that it's written out like that, no, there's not. But it does say that your body is what? Temple of the Holy Spirit. Is that not right? And as such, guess what? It should be treated as a place where God resides. You know what I'm saying? Let me ask you a question. Think you're going to sit down in a bar with Jesus and have a beer? I don't think so. Think you're going to pile up down there in the aquariums? Y'all ever see them aquariums? I don't think they have them anymore. You couldn't even see the people in there. There were plexiglass. There was Fort Gordon. You couldn't even see them. There were people in there. There was smoke everywhere. You know, you talk about second-hand smoke. They had it 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, 10th hand. You know what I'm saying? And it was a plexiglass. It looked, to me, it looked like a thing for, no, not for fish, but it looked like a hothouse. That's what it looked like. It was just clear plexiglass all the way around. Top on it and everything. You couldn't even see people until they come up to the very edge of the glass. So you didn't know whether you were looking at an aquarium or what. Well, let me ask you, what's that thing I built in the backyard for your mother was a chicken coop? A greenhouse. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Oh, it's tough up here with the brain damage. I ain't kidding you. But anyway, the idea is that guess what? When your lungs don't work anymore and people say, I can't believe why God let that come into my life. Your liver's hard as a rock because you've been swizzling down everything that you could drink, including mouthwash and everything else because it had alcohol in it. And your liver don't work no more. And you say, gee, wonder why God allowed that. What did he tell you? Your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Is that not right? And you should treat it that way. Now, I can take you to several other verses. But what I'm trying to tell you is this. Jesus said, guess what? The things that I tell you, they're not hard. They're not grievous. You know why? You know why you know that? Because if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, guess what you find out? He loves you the same way. And when he tells you don't do something, it isn't because he just don't want you to have no fun. It isn't because he's afraid you're going to play with matches and burn yourself. It's because guess what? Don't do that because for the best life you can have, you don't need to participate in that. And you know, when you tell people that, say, look, you shouldn't be involved in this lifestyle. They get mad with you. Let's get poked out. You know what I'm saying? But you're telling them because you love them. Hey, God is not going to ordain this. It's all there is to it. If you're living in sin, God will not ordain it. It's just all there is to it. It violates everything that he's told us. You remember when we talked about the commandments? The very first line, these are moral absolutes. There's no argument with it. I gotta stop right now. Well, we got time. It's about 5 after now, too, and the kids are back in